Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Irresistible and I'm a manifestation and soul realignment coach. My channel is geared towards helping you become your highest potential so that you can create and live the extraordinary life that is your birthright. In today's video, I want to talk about how every single thing you are experiencing in your reality is a result of an assumption you are making or a judgment you are making. It's one or the other. But before we get started, I want you to know that I offer both email and video coaching. So if you need help with manifesting your desire, then definitely do check out the options in the description below. And of course, do not forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon in order to receive a notification anytime I upload a new video. So let's get started. I had a meeting with a client the other day and he was telling me about how he was facing issues at work with his boss preferring the ladies. So his work is commission based and he is not receiving the support he expected to be receiving. So when we were talking, I always have my clients fill out a questionnaire before we actually meet so that we can maximize the time that we're spending together. And I noticed that he had mentioned that the boss prefers the ladies. And I told him that is an assumption. He said, no, that is not an assumption. That is a fact. And of course, he sees it as fact because he's seeing it in his physical reality. And he's saying, I did not come with this assumption. I came with the assumption that he is going to support me. But my colleagues told me that he prefers the ladies. And so here, it does not matter the source of your assumption. Yes, he did have that assumption that his new boss will support him once he joined this new company. But then when he heard from his colleagues that the boss prefers the ladies, he chose to adopt that as a fact for himself. There are no facts. Everything is an assumption. You are the one who is choosing to accept that assumption. So this is how it could have played out. And I'll give you example as well from my own experience. So he could have said, no, because I am a top performer, that will not apply to me. He will send leads my way. He could have had that assumption. Instead, he chose to go along with what the colleagues were saying. And then because he bought into that assumption, he started to see it in his physical reality. So is it the chicken or the egg that came first? It is 100% the assumption that came first, always. How it came, why you chose to adopt it is a different matter, but it's always the assumption that came first. That idea of the boss preferring the ladies could have dissolved if he chose not to buy into it. It would have dissolved. He would not have seen it, or he would have ignored the circumstance and it would have dissolved. That is why reacting to circumstances is another way of creating, because anytime you see a circumstance and you judge it to be a certain way, perhaps if he met the boss and he saw him sending a few deals towards the ladies, he could have adopted that as an assumption himself by judging the situation and saying, it looks like my boss prefers the ladies. It's a judgment, right? So he could have bought into that through his own judgment of the scenario, even though it may have been coincidental, right? So it's how you also react to circumstances and the meaning you give certain circumstances and the story you develop around that circumstance that must then be reflected in physical reality. When you choose to ignore it, if he's looked at that and he saw his mind going towards that judgment and he stopped his mind, he could have said, no, it's just a coincidence, I'm ignoring this. And it could have dissolved. And his boss would not have been perceived to be preferring the ladies. So it's always either you're buying into an assumption or you're looking at a certain situation and you're judging it. Also an assumption, right? You're judging it and you're drawing conclusions based on what little you're seeing from that circumstance, if that makes sense. So I'll give you an example from my own experience. It happened several times with me. I was working on a project several years ago, and this lady had a reputation that preceded her. So everyone was talking about how tough she is, how difficult she is, how rude she is, and all of that. And when I joined, I said, no, I'm not going to buy into that. I'm not going to pay attention to that, because ultimately I care about how my work flows, right? So me buying into that was going to complicate my work, right? So for me, I always have the assumption that people are often misjudged. I chose not to buy into that. So what ended up happening is my experience was completely different to everybody else's experience. What I experienced with her was ease and flow. There was a lot of ease and flow. The minute I decided to buy into what others are saying, I immediately started seeing the same. So you have to understand that it's always your choice whether to adopt or not to adopt other people's judgments, other people's circumstances. You say, my circumstance is different. Things are different with me. I don't experience that. For whatever reason, you build that rock solid self-concept around yourself that, yeah, maybe they're experiencing that. They're choosing to create that. They're choosing to buy into that. I'm choosing not to have that in my experience. And then that is what you will experience. You will have your situation be different than everybody else's. So I always want you to remember that you are always choosing to uphold an assumption. You're always choosing whatever assumptions you are making about someone. Now, sometimes with the same person, this client, he told me that he also, because he's also working on manifesting his specific person, he told me that I went in with a lot of positive assumptions about her. Yet, I experienced this, XYZ, with this person. They reflected back to me the opposite of all my assumptions. And here, this is where you want to look inwards and see what is a dominant assumption that is superseding all positive assumptions you have about that person. And he actually had one. It was also in his questionnaire. He unknowingly wrote it, because you know, when you dig in, when you specify what assumptions you have about the other person, you're coming up with the assumptions, right? So I told him, well, yes, but you also have this assumption that this person does XYZ, and this supersedes all the positive assumptions that you have about her. And it immediately registered for him. He's like, yes, you're right, you're right. So it's always, always, always an assumption that you are making, even if it didn't come from you, even if you have a lot of positive assumptions. Sometimes there's a negative assumption that supersedes all positive assumptions. And also how you are responding to circumstances, how you are perceiving and judging circumstances, because a circumstance is neutral. But then you bring in two different people observing the circumstance. One is going to have a negative judgment around it, and one may not have that same negative judgment. So it's always how you are judging your circumstances that also plays a role. Remember this, remember this. It's always coming from you. I hope this video is a good reminder of how you are creating in every moment through your own assumptions. And if you like this video, then please hit the thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.